It's something in your head. It's nothing you heard or something you read. Never had a gun, but you never saw the blade. Brought to your knees, but you never prayed. Jesus in disguise, Jehovah passing by, the burden of a tear hanging in your eyes. Jesus in disguise, a scar across the sky. You were looking for a king you would never recognize. Jesus in disguise. Ever feel like you've been somewhere before? You know the key, you know which door. Speak the words your lips have never known, because your heart told you so. Jesus in disguise, Jehovah passing by, the burden of a tear hanging in your eyes. Jesus in disguise, a scar across the sky. You were looking for a king you would never recognize. Jesus in disguise. Jesus in disguise. So open my eyes wide as I can, blind as I am, blind as I am. Open my eyes wide as I can, blind as I am, blind as I am. Jesus in disguise. Jesus in disguise. Jesus in disguise. Blind as I am, blind as I am. Jesus in disguise. Open my eyes wide as I can, blind as I am, blind as I am.
Good morning.
Nice to see a full band.
Isn't it nice to have the
It's
band
nice to hear it,
together
too.
here? Not that we are not missing you, Bob. You were doing so well up here, but
That one song goes really fast.
still got tennis elbow from it. Probably. Okay, probably. But you did well, and you do well. Thank you.
Yes, you do.
Let's just go to the Lord this morning and ask Him to be here with us. Father, we thank you so much for your love, and we thank you for the beauty of February. Thank you for the days of sunshine that we've had, God, and the time to be out and enjoy it, Lord. And so I just praise you for that, Lord. Beauty in the winter, God, as I've so many times witnessed, Lord. And God, may you just come now and be with us on this day. Be with us in this place. Come and anoint this building. Anoint the hearts that are here, Father, to receive your word today, God, that our minds would be open and that we would be ready to learn something new today, to draw nearer to you, to feel your presence in our daily lives even more. And we just thank you and praise you. God, as we come and worship, as we play music, may it be a song of praise to you. May it be a love song to you. May it be a worship to you, Lord. We just thank you and praise you. Just come be with us. Fill us. In the name of Jesus Christ, I ask. Amen.
By the way, there's snow coming. Snow coming, it's on the shore.
snow coming?
Yeah, it's all the way across into Minnesota.
It's supposed to be really
It's all the
bad.
way
Coming right at us.
God, please bring the snow.
We had this one.
If we don't have the snow, we don't get spring when we really want it. And things freeze off. And the farmers complain, and the trees are complaining.
We haven't had enough moisture.
Yeah, yeah.
Still awake, so I pick up a pen and a page, and I started writing just what I'd say if we were face to face. I'd tell you just what you mean to me, tell you these simple truths. Be strong in the Lord and never give up hope. You're gonna do great things. I already know God's got his hand on you, so don't live life in fear. Forgive and forget, but don't forget why you're here. Take your time and pray. These are the words I will say. You said you were hurting, and I felt your pain in my heart. I want to tell you, I keep on praying, love will find you where you are. I know, 'cause I've already been there, so please hear these simple truths. Be strong in the Lord and never give up hope. You're gonna do great things. I already know God's got his hand on you, so don't live life in fear. Forgive and forget, but don't forget why you're here. Take your time and pray. These are the words I would say from one simple life to another. I would say, come find peace in the Father. Be strong in the Lord and never give up hope. You're gonna do great things. I already know God's got his hand on you, so don't live life in fear. Forgive and forget, but don't forget why you're here. Take your time and pray. Thank God for each day. His love will find a way. These are the words I would say. I was born in Tennessee, late July humidity. Doctor said I was lucky to be alive. I've been in trouble since the day that I got here, trouble till the day that I disappeared. That'll be the way that I finally get it right. There is hope for me yet, because God won't forget all the plans I was a hopeless fool, all right. I don't know how, but I made it through. It's one of those things that you gotta do. I always had a knack for telling the truth. There is hope for me, yeah, because God won't forget all the plans He's made for me. Have to wait and see. He's not finished with me yet. He's not finished with me yet. Still wondering why I'm here, still wrestling with my fears, but oh, He's up to something. And the further on I go, I've seen enough to know that I'm not here for nothing. He's up to something. Now's my time to be a man, follow my heart as far as I can. No telling where I'm ending up tonight. Never slow down, so it seems. Singing my heart is one of my dreams. All I've gotta do is hold on tight. There is hope for me, yeah, because God won't forget all the plans He's made for me. I'll have to wait and see. He's not finished with me yet. 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 It don't have a job, won't pay your bill, won't buy you a home in Beverly Hills. Won't fix your life in 5 easy steps. Ain't the law of the land for the government, but it's all you need, and love will hold us together, make us a shelter to weather the storms, and I'll be my brother's keeper, so the whole world will know that we're not alone. It's waiting for you, knocking at your door, in the moment of truth, when your heart hits the floor, and you're on your knees, and love will hold us together, make us a shelter to weather the storms, and I'll be my brother's keeper, so the whole world will know that we're not alone. This is the first day of the rest of your life. This is the first but it's all you know. You spin your wheels and dig your heels and down you go. So predictable, but it's not your fault. How can you expect to do your best when you're scared to fall? 'Cause the pain is real, but you will survive. That's how you know you're alive. 'Cause it's okay now, hey now, you can let go. It's when you find out, everybody knows that there just ain't no easy way out. And I know it might not look that way, but you're gonna live to fight another day. Outside of town, let's get out of here where all our fears don't hang around. Here's another chance, take it while you can, 'cause it sure won't pass, and move too fast and it's gone again. You're on the edge now, but you will survive. How you know you're alive? 'Cause it's okay now. So afraid of. Hey now, you can let go. It's when you find out, everybody knows that there just ain't no easy way out. And I know it might not look that way, but you're gonna live to fight another day.
Sound awesome. I'm very happy to see and hear you guys up there, so good job. I want to continue with Hebrews chapter 11, but now I just really want to go through the list of all these heroes of faith. And we've been talking about faith, and it's kind of like up in the air, a little bit nebulous, and I keep trying to hit this definition every week, but maybe it's better to actually see some examples and to study some examples from the Old Testament on some heroes of faith. So we're going to do that today, starting today, and this will take us right up right up to Easter. And so we just want to look at several Old Testament examples, and so we'll be read their names from Hebrews 11, and then we'll go back into the Old Testament and read some more about them. So today we're going to start with the very first verses of Hebrews 11. But before we get there, this is really what this whole chapter is about, and the definition of faith that's in verse 1. It's a lot about what is not seen. Believing in something that you can't see. Is that hard to do? It's not as hard for us, is it? Because we live kind of in a more scientific age, and we know there are things that are real that we just can't see, like viruses, right? I mean, that's all over the news right now, isn't it? And boy, if you don't believe in something you can't see, I tell you, I can guarantee you that if you thought there was an outbreak of coronavirus right here in Oceana County, you would be walking around with masks on your face, just like they are in China. In fact, it seems like every time there's like a worldwide outbreak of a virus, people start wearing these masks, and they do that in public. And we don't see that too much here in the United States because we're a little bit overconfident in our abilities to combat things like this. But yeah, Randy?
The computer-generated calculations are showing that there's going to be over 1 million people that are killed from this coronavirus.
Oh, really? I did read this morning, the headline said that there's more, they now know there are more infected.
At the rate that it is spreading, the new cases coming forward, the computer-generated calculations, there's going to be over 1 million people that die from this.
Well, I don't know, that probably that doesn't take in account that they are able to vaccinate now. They do have a vaccination.
That's calculated into it.
Is it really? Oh,
But before they can get worldwide vaccination,
yeah.
that's the calculation.
Well, we may be wearing these masks before you know it. I did this in Mexico City when I was flying out back in 2010, I think it was. One of the first worldwide scares. I think it was swine flu. I forget what they called it. But I went to the airport in Mexico City, and everybody is wearing this mask, and I was like, wow, this is scary. So I got a mask. I wore one too, because it's not hard to believe in a virus, even though you can't see it. You have to have super microscopes to see a virus. In fact, viruses are so small that masks really don't trap. They go right through a mask, but
Makes you feel better.
you still feel a lot better. You sure will. But what we can't see is the effect of something that we can't see. So we can see the effects of a virus, and we can see the effects of gravity. We can see the effects of atoms and air and molecules. And so all these things that we can't see, we know they're there, and we believe in them because we can see the effects. And this is kind of the faith that Hebrews is talking about too, that there is a cause and an effect. And we have the tendency to believe in the effect more than the cause. We have a tendency to put our faith in the creation rather than the Creator. And this is human nature. We do this because we can see this, we feel this, we know it's there. And we have to actually stop and think to go back and say, oh, well, there's something behind what we can see and touch and feel, and it's the Creator. And this has been a constant, I don't know if you want to call it a struggle, but a choice that humans have made since Adam and Eve. Do we worship the Creator, or do we worship the creation? Do we believe in something we can't see, or should we put our faith and our trust in something we can? And boy, I know you'll sit here and you'll say, yeah, I believe in something I can't see, but how do we live and how do we act? And it comes out, doesn't it? And so we're going to look at Hebrews chapter 11. Let's start with the chapter, verse 1. This is a great definition also. Now, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for, and that's where we're going to go with this list of heroes of faith. And then verse 3 says, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. And so we're going to stop right there, because creation itself tells us that there's got to be something unseen behind it. And even to this day, we have to make this decision. Will we worship the creation or worship the Creator? And the very definition of atheism is materialism, or believing that the material that we have, matter and energy, are eternal. And so by default, we worship them. And I know an atheist or even a scientist or a materialist is going to say, no, I don't worship this. But what do you put your faith in? What do you put your trust in? And so even to this day, this is a struggle, a temptation that we constantly battle. Where do I put my faith and where do I put my trust? And so this whole chapter, Hebrews 11, talks about these people who learned how to put their trust in something they couldn't see, put their faith in a God that they could not see. When the rest of the world was worshiping idols that they could see. And that's the whole thing of idolatry, is let's make an image, let's make something that we can touch, that we can see, and say, this is our God. Because we are like that. We tend to lean towards what we can see rather than what we can't see. And so even this verse says, let's pay more attention to the Creator, who is unseen and who made everything that we can see, but He didn't use pre-existing material, so there was no matter and energy before God said, let there be light. And so we believe in a first cause, a Creator who is unseen and cannot be represented by something that is seen. You can't make an idol to this God. And that's what the Old Testament, they struggled with this all the way through. And I'm going to say today that we still struggle with this today. Where are we going to put our faith? In what we can see or what we can't see? And that is a difficult choice sometimes. So what we're going to do today, looking at Hebrews chapter 11, rather than starting on the list of people that are named, I want to stop for just a second and talk about a name that does not appear on the list. This is fascinating to me, that you've got all these heroes of the faith, and the Hebrew writer starts with creation, so you know he's going back to Genesis. And every time I say Hebrew writer, in case you're wondering, nobody knows who wrote the book of Hebrews. So some think it was Paul, the Apostle Paul. Very good evidence for that. But other people say, no, it can't be Paul because it's a little bit different. So nobody knows exactly who wrote it, so I always just say the Hebrew writer. But anyway, who's missing? You go from the creation, and then the first name that appears on the list is Abel and Cain. So who did we skip? Adam and Eve. Where are these guys? Wait a second. Shouldn't they be the most important ones? They should be like first on the list. Why aren't they there? Look at the next slide, Jesse. Why aren't they there? They're conspicuously absent. I love that word, conspicuously. It just means very noticeable, extremely noticeable. And it's almost like the Hebrew writer did it on purpose so that we would catch this and realize, wait a second, he skipped Adam and Eve. Why? Because they failed this test. They failed the test of faith. Do we believe in the Creator or in the creation? Now, before we judge them too harsh, don't forget, we have all failed this test. even the ones that are on the list.
Was that, I was going to say, didn't people Cain?
Yep. Yeah, Cain killed Abel, but the first thing in Hebrews 11 was that Abel made a sacrifice that was better than Cain's. And so, well, why did it skip Adam and Eve? Well, I think it is because they were the first ones who had to go through this test, and they failed the test, And we have all failed that same test. Whether to believe in the Creator or in the creation. Where would we put our faith and our trust and our whole belief system? So we're going to look at Adam and Eve kind of as a negative example, okay? Because the Hebrew writer left them out. And I think he did it on purpose so that we would scratch our heads and say, oh, Adam and Eve didn't pass this test. At least not initially. I think they did later. And that's the hope that we have too, that we can still come back and retake the test. So let's go back to Genesis chapter 3, and we'll read about the fall, the temptation, starting with verse 6. It'd be great if we read the whole chapter, but I want to keep it brief because I've got 100 points to share today. So no, I've only got 3. Verse 6. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. The eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" And so you know the rest of the story. I won't read all of it, but God did go searching for them, and so that's the hope that we have as well. But I want to talk about their test of faith. Did they believe in the Creator or in the creation? Where did they put their faith? Well, they failed this test. They ate the fruit. They disobeyed because they believed more, or they put more faith in the creation than in the Creator. And that's what faith is. It's to put your faith and your belief and your obedience all based on somebody you can't see. And they would rather, and they did, put it in themselves first. So that's actually the first one. Point number 1 is that they put their faith in their own reason, their own intellect. You might even say they put their faith in the image of God that they were carrying, because they were created in the image of God. You go back to Genesis 2, it said God created man and woman in His image. And that means the whole thing that separates us from animals: intellect, intelligence, reason, even spirituality. We have a spirit, we have an eternal spirit, and things like that. And free will, the ability to know the difference between good and evil, right and wrong. And so that is the image of God in us. And this image of God is just fascinates me. Have you seen that Latin phrase, imago Dei? It just means image of God. So a little bit of my Old Testament teaching that I learned in college anyway. But an image is something that you can see, right? When we talk about an image, it's a picture, it's a visible thing. And all throughout the Old Testament, except here in Genesis 2, when God created Adam and Eve in His image, but the rest of the Old Testament condemns the use of images for worship. Because you can't make a statue of God who is unseen and say, okay, bow down to this, and I'm going to worship that. That's what they kept on doing. And so, all throughout the Old Testament, there's these inanimate objects that were stone or wood to try to represent something spiritual, something unseen. But because of our human nature, we have this tendency to I want to see my God. If I'm going to worship a God, I want to see Him, right? And so I'm going to put Him in a place here, and I can put Him in a box. I can control Him, and this is our human nature that we have always struggled with, even from Adam and Eve, since the fall especially, to worship something because we can see it. And so, idol worship was worship of sun and moon and stars, and worship the seasons, worship nature, worship animals, not just inanimate objects. I imagine there was actually worship of animals in those days. And I say that because of what's going on even to this day. Did you see this like 3 weeks ago? Put the next slide up, Jesse. This was on January 29th, an article I saw on the internet, and this was the first line of the article. A mutant goat was born with a human face and is being worshipped as an avatar of God in a small Indian village. Did you see that? Oh, am I the only one who saw that? Poor goat. I mean, goodness, it's deformed, basically. It was born deformed, but because it had a face that was like the image of man, these people in this small village said, oh, that's an avatar of God. You know what an avatar is? It's something you can see. It's an image, a picture that represents something else. And so they worship this goat. I don't know, the poor thing, I think they ought to put it out of its misery, but that's what humans do. We do this. Why do we do this? I mean, you probably wouldn't be tempted to worship a goat, right? Okay. But if you had no clue who God was, and you didn't understand, and your only best guess is to look at things in nature, that's what we tend to do. Hinduism, Buddhism, a lot of the Eastern religions basically worship the creation itself. That there are spiritual realities out there, yeah, but they're all part of this creation. There's no difference between God and matter. In fact, I'm God, you're God. We can worship each other. And if a goat is born with a face that looks like a man, let's worship that. Because that's what we do. Look at the next slide, Jesse. This is why we do it. Because it's easier to worship something we can see. We have this tendency as humans that we want to see it. If you're going to put your faith in something, you want to see it. It's hard to step out on something that you can't see, right? That's why we call it a step of faith. And so Adam and Eve fell into this deception because they basically ended up, without realizing it, I'm not trying to say that they thought about what they were doing, but they were basically worshiping the image of God in themselves rather than God Himself. They were worshiping their own intellect, their own reason, their own judgment. They said, well, we can decide whether it's good or bad to eat this fruit. We can make up our minds on this. We can worship our own reason. That's what they're basically doing. They're trusting themselves rather than trusting God. And we do this to this day, over and over and over. In fact, our society is really good at this. I run into this constantly. People say things like, well, I believe, and then they'll say something like, well, I believe it's okay for this. I believe this. I believe that. I believe I'm going to heaven. I say, why do you believe that? Well, that's what I believe. I believe, that's what God is like, and that's what I believe. I said, well, how do you know that? Well, I just believe it. I've decided it. Are they worshiping God, or are they worshiping themselves? himself, right? I believe it. That's my opinion. And because I'm an individual and I have these rights, and you can't tell me what you believe is any more important than what I believe, right? I believe this. I hear this all the time. Our society is really good at this. And we have elevated ourselves to the position of God.
Worshiping your own intellect.
Yeah. It's called humanism. When you're worshiping the image of God in yourself, or when you're worshiping the image of God you see in the mirror. Right? I know, we can put a face on it and just call it pure selfishness and call it pure egoism and things like that. But basically what you're doing is saying, I can decide for myself what is true and what is false, what is good and what is bad, whether to obey, God that's in creation, or the Creator, or obey myself.
That goes back to the way it comes out is whatever you treasure, that's where your heart is.
Oh yeah, that's
And
true.
this comes right back to that it kind of shows in what you treasure in life.
Oh, it comes up in so many other things. And it does result in a very materialistic outlook. Because then what you end up deciding is whatever feels good to you. It's based on my feelings. And so, whatever is comfortable, whatever helps me, get richer, healthier, whatever, I'm gonna put my faith in those things. So yeah, it's just like we said, where your heart is where your treasure is, and so that's one reason we get so wrapped up in materialistic things. So yeah, very good point. But Adam and Eve, and especially, I'm gonna just talk a little bit about Eve, but Eve was deceived because the snake, or the serpent, told her that if you will eat this fruit, then you will be like God. And that is part of the deception, is the belief that we can raise ourselves to the level of God and decide what's right and wrong, and decide for ourselves. I believe this. But there's another part of this deception that we may not understand, or she especially didn't get it, and that they were already like God. They already had the image of God in them. They already had free will. They already had the ability to obey or disobey, to decide, to see this is good and that is bad. They already had that. And the deception and the lie was that by disobeying and by eating the fruit, they didn't become more like God, but they became less. They actually lost the image of God in themselves. And to this day, we have the same problem. You think you have free will? Just try to get out of an addiction. Oh man. These things that we think we are free of, sure, I can quit anytime I want. But we're trapped. We're chained. And a lot of the sin that we deal with just grabs us and we can't break free. So we actually lose freedom. We actually lose the image of God in us, especially the moral image. And so that was a big part of this deception, and that's what you get when you worship yourself rather than worship an unseen God. So faith is the opposite. Faith is putting your trust in God and trusting in what you can't see rather than the man in the mirror. So I don't trust my judgment. I need somebody else, a higher power. I need somebody else with a better intellect. I need someone who can tell me what's right and wrong. that doesn't change in situations. It's always right or it's always wrong. And that's what the Bible is. That's the Word of God. So that's part of faith, is trusting Him and then obeying Him. Because He said so, because it's true, because it's right. And if He said it's good, then it's good. If He says it's bad, then it's bad. It doesn't matter what my opinion is, because that would be lifting myself to that position. Okay, so that's the first thing that Adam and Eve did, and I think that was probably the main reason why they failed the test, is because they were trusting themselves. They basically worshiped the image of God in themselves, what they could see rather than an unseen God. Look at number 2, the next slide, Jesse. I'm going to put this one on Eve, because this is what it said, that the woman saw the fruit in verse 6. Although I'm not saying that women tend to do this more than men. In fact, I would say men actually tend to follow this way more than women. Although I don't know, because maybe because I'm a man and I can relate to this. But the deception of the eyes, to trust your eyes rather than what you can't see. Trust what looks good rather than what somebody told you is bad. And I mentioned right here on purpose the unseen result, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Eve started out looking at the fruit, right? She saw it. It was appealing. It was visually attractive. She liked it. It looked like something you would want to eat. We don't know what it was. Probably an apple, wasn't it? I don't know. It doesn't say whether it was an apple or a cherry or some other unknown fruit or whatever. And that really doesn't matter. But it does say that it was pleasing to the eye, and it seemed desirable. It seemed desirable for gaining wisdom, is what it said. Now, what do we know about appearances?
They're skin deep.
They're skin deep, yeah. Appearances can be deceiving, and they often are deceiving. Have you ever bought something because you saw it on TV? You just thought, it just looks, oh man, I want one of those. And then you bring it home and it's not everything you thought it was going to be. It's disappointing. It was actually, it can actually be deceiving. You know, it looks like it looks, really tough and durable, and it's going to really work really well. And you bring it home and it's plastic or something, it just does not work. Well, we all fall for this, and we all get into this problem of appearances that are deceptive. But what happened here was not that Eve was deceived just by her eyes, but she chose to believe her eyes instead of what God said. And God said, if you eat this, you will die. Did Adam and Eve ever see death to this point? They've never seen it, had they? I think that's a big problem of what's going on during this temptation, is that the unseen result, or the warning, was about something vague and in the future, and something you really, I don't know what that is. They've never seen death.
There's a lot of people like that today.
Oh yeah.
And don't worry about such a thing as faith in God, because they have not seen death.
Mm-hmm.
They've not experienced it. And so there's nothing, I guess, that would be a fear in that. And not to say that you find your faith because you're afraid of
Right.
death or fear of the end. I came to my faith because I found something that was everlasting that I wanted a relationship with.
Because you realized what looked good wasn't so good. Yeah, the appearances were deceiving.
Grass is always greener.
Grass is always greener. Oh, that's a good point too. Our eyes do that to us, don't they? And it's partly because we see something and we immediately want it, and we're expecting, that it's going to bring pleasure, it's going to bring satisfaction, it's going to, immediate gratification. Immediate gratification is so much easier to believe in than some vague, unseen result. And so Adam and Eve had never seen death, and they knew that God said this, if you eat this fruit you will die, but they'd never seen death, and they didn't, maybe they had seen an animal die, or maybe an accident or something, I don't know. Don't you wish an elephant would have stepped on that serpent sometime just by accident? It would have saved us a whole lot of problems. But anyway, I don't know. A lot of theologians believe that death did not enter the scene until the fall, until Adam and Eve sinned. And so they had this vague warning about a future thing that they didn't understand. So it's a lot easier to trust what they did understand and what they could see. And it looks good, right? What's this death thing? Oh, I don't know. Let's not worry about it. We do the same thing today, don't we? Just like Randy said. We know what death is, right? We know physically what it is. We've seen animals die. We've had loved ones die. So we know there is such a thing as death. But we still don't understand spiritual death. We have vague ideas of heaven and hell, life after death. But that's in the future, right? That's way over there. That's vague. It's an unseen result, consequence. And since I can't see it, but I can see this, I'm going to go for this. And we tend to do that, don't we? The Bible calls this the lust of the eyes. What a great phrase, isn't it? The lust of the eyes. In 1 John 2:16, John mentions the lust of the eyes and the lust of the flesh and the pride of life. And these are the things that drag us down and into sin. And it starts with this lust of the eyes. Aren't we just visually oriented? Again, maybe I say this because I'm a man, but even men tend to look at things, and if it looks good, then that's what we're going to go for. I'm shopping around for a truck. And so I want to see these pictures online. So I look at that truck and I can see it. It looks good, sharp, not too much rust on it. But I have no idea what mechanical condition it really is in, deep down inside. Where it counts, I don't know. And I know this in my head. You can't just buy a vehicle because it looks good. But there's still something inside of me that says, oh, I like the looks of that one, I'm going to get that. So we do this, don't we? We look at each other, men and women. She looks really nice, she's really pretty. And so I'm attracted to her without even knowing who she is deep down inside.
Yeah, and then they speak.
Yeah, well, hopefully you learn a little bit more before you make a commitment. But men are even more visually oriented than women when it comes to attraction. And so I'm very, very thankful for this, because I'm thankful that my wife was less interested in looks than I was. Are we all men? Aren't we grateful for that? But looks can be deceiving. But when we get the report, when we hear somebody tell us, okay, that if you go for that, it will cause problems down the road. It will hurt you. You will die. You will go to hell. Faith is believing that instead of what you can see right in front of you. Instead of falling for the lust of the eyes and falling for appearances and what seems good at the moment, faith says, wait a second. God, who is unseen, has told me that this is not good and it will result in a bad thing, in consequences, in unseen results. And I don't know what those are yet. It's pretty vague. I still don't understand what life after death is going to look like, although the Bible gives some pretty clear pictures and it helps us quite a bit. But we have this tendency to trust what we can see instead of what we can't. And the lust of the eyes says, I want what I can see right now, and I'm not going to worry about what's down in the future. And so we fall for it. And that's what Eve did. She did not believe that death was as bad as the fruit looked good. And we do that today. I mean, look at what you do, what people do. They say they don't want to go to hell, and yet what they're doing today feels better than what they think hell might be bad. I don't know. Sometimes I scratch my head on that one too, but again, I think it comes back to worshiping yourself and say, I don't believe that hell is going to be that way, and I don't believe I'm going to hell. People like that say things like that too. Great, I'm glad to hear that. How do you know? Anyway, that brings it back to the trusting of the Word too. So faith does the opposite again. Faith trusts an unseen God and His judgment, His declaration if this is good or if this is evil. Faith believes in an unseen result. Faith believes in heaven and in hell. Whether you want to or not, faith believes it and trusts what God says about it. So the third one, let's get to that. Goodness, I spent too much time on that one, sorry. I wanted to get to this one because this one is really interesting. Trusting your heart rather than an unseen relationship, an unseen God and His love. Here's why I want to explain this a little bit, because you have to read way down between the lines here. In fact, I'm probably going out on a limb on some of this, and there's been a lot of conjecture and thinking about what's going on between Adam and Eve at this place. And where was Adam when the serpent was talking to her and when she was looking at the fruit and she was reaching out to touch it and to pick it? Where was Adam? Why wasn't he saying, no? Where was he? Well, we don't know for sure, other than we have two words in Genesis 3:6. She gave the fruit to the man, to her husband, who was with her. So was he with her the whole time? Was he with her when she was being deceived? Why didn't he step in and say, no, that's not right? Because he should have known better. Where was he? Was it just a general with her? He was with her in the garden and she picked the fruit and ate it and then brought it to him? I don't know for sure. I've heard arguments both ways on that as to what was going on. But what we do know is that no matter how you look at it, women we tend to put the blame on women, right? It was the woman, she did it first, right? Well, no matter how you look at it, Adam really comes off looking worse than Eve. Because if she was deceived by the serpent, Adam disobeyed willfully, knowing better. He was not deceived. He chose to do it with his eyes wide open. And why did he do that? And again, I'm reading way down deep between the lines. I don't know. Maybe a lot of people have said this. Maybe he chose to follow Eve because he loved her so much. He just couldn't stand the thought of losing her. You know, if she eats this and she's going to be punished and she's going to die, I'm going to go with her. And that sounds like true love. What a great love story, right? A love story right here on Valentine's week, and it just sounds like, wow, what a great thing. Well, I want to say this morning that it is not. That Adam, if this is true, and I'm kind of a lot of conjecture, I believe that Adam was totally misguided if he chose Eve over his relationship with God. I think he chose wrong. I think that was his sin, his fault. Again, it's pure conjecture, but if that is what happened, he did wrong. He chose a human relationship over the love of an unseen God. And this might be the strongest temptation even to this day, isn't it? I mean, we all have this human need for love and a relationship, and we want to be loved and we want to love. But I want somebody that I can actually touch and feel, and somebody that I can see. I love God, I'm glad he loves me, but I can't see him. Can't hug him. And so this is a real strong temptation. Now I'm going to, again, step out on limbs because I don't know for sure. Nobody knows what would have happened. You ever thought about that? What if Adam had chosen not to sin and did not follow Eve? Now, I'm going to say this to step out on a limb. I think God would have found a way. He would have found a way to make it work. And Adam wouldn't have lost Eve.
He lost another rib.
Maybe. And you think God would have created another woman for him? That's possible. But here's why I say this, because I would never ever tell anybody today to divorce their unbelieving spouse. Because you never know. And I believe God would have found a way to make it work. Just like God makes it work for us today. Even if we've made a mistake, even if we have chosen a human relationship instead of God, God can still make it work. But I also want to tell young people, don't do that. Don't choose a human relationship over your relationship with God. Because it will be harder. It will be difficult. And it could, obviously for Adam, it was sin. It was part of the fall. He chose this human love. So let me just wrap it up this way. I know we're running out of time because Valentine's week we've got to talk about love, right? So God will make it work. We don't have to divorce somebody because they're not a believer, but we should be careful about getting into a relationship without God. And that's what makes even a Christian marriage work, doesn't it? Both spouses that do believe in God, you still put God over your relationship with your spouse. He's still number one. So this is faith. It's choosing the unseen over the seen, the creator over the creation. So it is trusting an unseen God and not yourself. It's trusting an unseen results and not your eyes. And it's trusting an unseen love and not just your heart feelings. Oh, this feels good, so it's got to be right. Now, we've all made the mistake, right? None of us passed this test. We've all messed up. And that's where the good news is, in verse 9 that we read, that God showed up. He still showed up on the scene. He still went to the garden. He still said, Adam, where are you? He kept on looking for him until he found him. And he's doing that to this day. So even though we've messed up, he's still looking for us. And he sent Jesus Christ to find us. So let's close with that this morning. Let's stand together and pray.
I just want to say one more
Go
thing.
ahead. Sure, go ahead.
You can have a strong relationship with God. It's not that we can hold God, but we can hold God. Holy Spirit, you know. And I talk with God a lot. When I actually get that point where I feel so good about it and say, I love you, God, I feel my heart strangely warm.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it's not real. It's just an unseen. In fact, it becomes more real than what we can see. So, Father, we thank you for this. We thank you for faith. And we ask for more faith. Lord, we all admit that we have been unbelievers, so help our belief. We all admit that we have chosen poorly, so help us to be redeemed and to fix those things in us. Thank you for finding us and searching for us. Help us now to grow in our faith, to continually choose the Creator over the creation. And we thank you in Jesus' name.